Hello and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues. Half the world's population is voting this year. India, of course, in a few months, and also the United States and the United Kingdom. Polls in the United Kingdom are giving the opposition Labour Party a winning lead after 14 years in the opposition.
That's his record, those are his values, and that is exactly how he should be judged.
Mr. Speaker, in 2008 I was the Director of Public Prosecutions, putting terrorists and murderers in jail. He was making millions betting on the misery of working people during the financial crisis.
And in an outreach to build a new UK-India strategic partnership are two of Labour's senior politicians, the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy and the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds. Thank you both very much for being on the NDTV Dialogues.
Thank you.
Ms. Lammy, so the timing of this visit is really interesting for us. We've got the elections countdown here in India and perhaps polls in the UK by autumn or definitely by January next year. Why did you choose this time to come? You've talked about building a new UK-India strategic partnership. Labour has a proposal for that. Why do you think this was the right time?
Well, look, the first thing to say is that the relationship between the United Kingdom and India transcends whoever is in government. This is an important strategic relationship, a history that goes back many, many generations, a deep people-to-people connection as well as a business-to-business connection. And of course, I'm here with Jonathan to underline that. Of course, it's also the case that if there is to be a change of government and if we have the privilege to serve, it's important that we understand the views of our Indian friends and business and industry and where the opportunities are to go forward. And the key message that I want to leave with people is that growth is our objective in the Labour Party if we have the privilege to serve, and that we recognise that India, this huge powerhouse, growing economy, growing population, growth against a backdrop where other parts of the world, and certainly in Europe, are not seeing anything like the growth. There's key opportunities for us going forward. Yes, we're working on a trade deal, but that is the floor of our relationship, not the ceiling. There's much more to do in the years ahead.
That's really interesting because, of course, one Tory Prime Minister ago, we were told that the UK-India FTA would be in place by that Diwali. We passed those Diwalis. There's another one coming up. And your leader, Keir Starmer, described it as a kabhi khushi, kabhi gum situation which in the UK-India FTA. What do you see as the major hurdles and what would Labour do to actually fix that in case it's not signed before the next election?
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people have promised a trade deal by certain dates, but we are here partly because, as you say, the nature of an election in India and one in the UK means there is, I know, some worry about how that timescale may impact those negotiations. We've come to make clear that if the Labour Party does form the next government in the UK, this is something we support, that we would want to implement or continue those negotiations. Of course, for both sides, it's got to be a good deal. It's got to work commercially, but there are clearly areas where we can see the potential for that to be something very significant indeed, and of course for the UK to be
which areas would you see those as?
Well, I think at the heart of that you've got the opportunity clearly, as you'd expect, to reduce tariffs in some certain areas for textiles in India. That is particularly significant. The one that's often given in the UK is of course Scotch whisky, but that's just one area where we can see that improved. Services access is absolutely crucial. Now, how we do that tends to be a harder part of negotiations, but alongside that, the investment treaty that's being discussed, these are things that you really could. Now, we don't want to go into shadow negotiations. We're not part of that, but I think we both recognise just what a significant opportunity this could be. But I want to reiterate what my colleague David has said, because people shouldn't think that we just want to finish this trade deal, get it done, significant as it would be, and that's the end. Mm-hmm. There are a whole range of further areas of collaboration. We've talked to people about technology, about defence, about what collaboration on the green transition might mean, not just for India and the UK, but for the rest of the world. The collaboration that we could do together could really have such a positive and beneficial impact. And I find that personally very exciting.
No, and in a sense, the India-UK relationship has changed. One aspect, of course, is that we overtook Great Britain to become the world's 5th largest economy. We're aiming now for the 3rd largest economy by 2030. How much do you think that's changed the way the two partners view each other, even negotiate with each other, and the fact that geopolitically also, India has taken a much more vocal role as a leader of the global south, as in asking for reform of multilateral institutions like the United Nations Security Council. Where do you see the new power balance, and where does the UK exactly stand in that then?
Well, look, let me say I welcome the position that India finds itself in as one of the world's great large democracies. That is hugely, hugely important. The levels of growth here, the growing, burgeoning middle class, the gripping of education and skills, the dynamism of the economy are exemplary, and there's much to learn. I think as I come here, and I've now visited India on many, many occasions, and I remember one of my first trips 22 years ago as a young minister in Tony Blair's government, and the transition has been immense. Let me just say, of course, we support India joining the UN Security Council alongside Germany, Japan, Brazil, and Africa as well. Very, very important indeed. The world is changing, and multilateral partnership is essential. And in that sense, India remains and will continue to be a key partner of the UK and our allies. We have a long history. There's much that we can do together in a dangerous world, and I'm very pleased to be meeting with your Foreign Secretary once again on this trip, but also to speak to your national security as well about the issues of shared concern.
I just wanted to bring up regarding foreign policy, because of course with Labour, and I think that in a sense did sour relations between Labour and the Indian Foreign Ministry when the Jeremy Corbyn had said at that time that he supports a proposal for an independent Kashmir. Now, of course, Keir Starmer has since corrected that. But do clarify for us what Labour's stand is on Kashmir. And also another sticking point with the UK and India has been the reaction to Khalistani protests last year at the Indian High Commission, and also the fact that the Sikhs for Justice routinely issues threats against Indian political leaders, and we feel that the UK response could have been stronger. What does Labour think on this?
Well, let me reiterate some fundamentals here. First, Jeremy Corbyn is not in the Labour Party any longer. We have had dramatic change since the 2019 election, led by Keir Starmer, and that is important to emphasise. And that has put us in the position where, once again, we hope to have the privilege of serving in a government. The second is to condemn entirely the extremist and destructive behaviour we saw in relation to the Indian High Commission in London. I was pretty robust in my comments at the time, and I'm happy to reiterate that again. We absolutely have to have zero tolerance of any extremist behaviour, and that includes extremist elements of the Khalistani community. Absolutely. But it's also to be clear that the vast majority of Sikhs in our own country and here in India are peace-loving people. And it is to underline that. The issues on Kashmir are complex, 75 years old and beyond. They are centrally issues for India, for Pakistan and the Kashmiri people. And we understand that in the British Labour Party.
Would you back, for instance, India has already called SFJ a terrorist organization. Would you call for stronger action against groups which call for assassination threats against Indian political leaders from UK soil?
I have not got the intelligence as a member of the UK opposition, but I do condemn entirely extremist behaviour from wherever it comes from. We have to be robust about that, whilst of course recognising that the Labour Party is an internationalist party. It's a party that believes in human rights, but we cannot have any truck with violence or extremism from wherever it's found.
Let me ask you, Mr. Reynolds, you talked about the services sector, and one thing I think which has bothered many Indians is the fact that with Indians, the mobility aspect, because of course you've seen Indian students are now amongst the highest international students population in the United Kingdom, but we hear this anti-immigration rhetoric, which for many people borders on the racist, whether it came from Suella Braverman or before that the former Home Secretary. How is Labour going to actually combat that, and what will your view be, given that immigration is such a political hot button in the UK elections?
Well, look, I want everyone to know, we all want everyone to know how much we value the relationships between India and the UK. The fact that when you're here on a delegation, so many people tell you that they studied in the UK or they lived there for a while. What a tremendous basis for that strong relationship. And of course, whether it is people coming for higher education, whether it is Indian companies, entrepreneurs investing in the UK, we fundamentally welcome that. Now, the UK has a points-based immigration system. It's a system that is designed to serve the best interests of the UK economy. And we're very comfortable talking about the benefits that that brings. It's clearly one that has restrictions built into it. That's the nature of a points-based system. And it would upset me if I thought that anyone thought that the UK wasn't welcoming that. And I hope people will see a different approach, can see the different approach that we bring from the Labour Party to that.
Did you find that some of the recent rhetoric being used was racist?
I think a lot of what we've seen from the Conservative government on immigration, how they've tackled the issue, how they fundamentally, I think, sent out a message that might be unwelcoming, is a challenge, is a problem. And I think if I look to the future of where the UK can play a role in the global economy, that is very much to the interests of ourselves in the UK. It's through championing our strengths, championing the things that we're good at, and higher education is part of that. And we are just much more comfortable on the Labour side in recognising that benefit. And I hope people can see the different change of tone and approach that we would bring to that. Of course, there are got to be limits on immigration, but that's what a points-based system is designed to do, to serve the interest of your own economy. And I can say from complete sincerity that the relationship that has meant for, whether it's Indian students coming or Indian businesses coming to the UK, we see as an unreservedly positive and welcoming thing.
We talk so often of multicultural Britain, and I think in that sense Prime Minister Sunak becoming Prime Minister was seen as a cause of celebration in India as well. But how do you think Labour will? Because of course we've seen that Labour's support amongst the Indian community in Great Britain, the largest ethnic minority in Great Britain, has fallen dramatically. I think a 2019 poll showed it's now about 30%, almost half from what it was once at 60%. How will you combat a proud Hindu Prime Minister as opposed to a Labour Prime Minister?
Well, look, let me say that I and the Labour Party also took great comfort and pleasure in the election of Rishi Sunak as the first UK Prime Minister of Indian origin. And that's personal to me. My family, my father arrived in the UK from Guyana in 1956. My mother's grandmother was from Calcutta. She arrived in Guyana as an indentured worker after the end of slavery in the century before last. So look, our history is immense, and that's why it's always wonderful for me to come back to India. There's lots that the curries is something that I've grown up with all of my life. Look, I think that the relationship between the UK and India supersedes whoever is in number 10 or running India, and I know you've got elections ahead, because it's an important relationship, it's an important partnership, not just a win-win for our two economies, but for the global community. And so we will fight for every election, and there are areas of the country, I'm thinking of Harrow and Brent, where there are historic Indian populations voting Labour, and we'll be fighting to encourage them to do that. That's why we're here doing an interview with you.
No, and of course I want to ask Mr. Reynolds, because you're talking about greater business investment, but the latest Labour attack on the Prime Minister has been about so-called allegations of VIP access to Infosys. Now, given that Infosys is one of our biggest software services providers, isn't it also counterproductive that when anything to do with Infosys is seen as Rishi Sunak's family getting preference or VIP access, as the Labour puts it?
Well, we do want to see greater business investment in the UK. We think that the link between our poor business investment at present under the Conservative Party relates to our poor productivity, and that has come through in a very disappointing rate of growth now for quite some time. So all of our agenda is based on doing that, and particularly, obviously, we want to attract inward investment to the UK to make that story a much better one.
Including Infosys, I guess.
Well, every company, whether it is from around the world, but obviously particularly because of the role of Indian investment in the UK. This is a really important thing to us. Now, all we want is that to be open, transparent, and available to everyone. So it's not about any one particular company, but there are concerns in the UK about what has been described as the VIP lane around companies who were introduced around the pandemic. Surely a healthy, robust system should be about open opportunities for everyone. That's why we're talking to everyone while we're here. We're telling them about opportunities in the energy transition, in the services sector, in professional and financial services. We want that to be open to everyone. That is all we ask, and that is all we will put forward. But we are confident that our agenda is a better one for business investment in the UK.
Though, of course, it does sometimes seem personal about Mr. Sunak, because given that Labour has also said that you want to abolish the non-dom tax, and that, of course, became a controversy around his wife, Akshata, which she was later cleared of. So it does seem like it becomes a bit personal and political then.
Well, look, our proposed changes to that particular tax regime are not about any individual person at all. We've made clear, our Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, repeatedly says all we ask is if you have made the UK your home, you pay the appropriate amount of tax in the UK that you should do. And of course we recognise the old-fashioned non-dom regime, which we want to change, would need to be replaced by something where people in the UK for a short period of time would pay an appropriate level of taxation on their UK earnings, similar to every other country in the world. But people will know that the history of the non-dom regime goes back a long time, really, to an era that is no longer appropriate. Mm-hmm. And there are concerns about a whole range of people making sure they are paying the right level of tax in the UK. All that policy is designed to do is to put that right, give people confidence that that is the regime we have. It is not targeted or based on any kind of political attack on anyone. It's about making sure we have a fair, robust and transparent process. And when people raise concerns about the overall level of taxation in the UK, we say we recognise that. The reason taxes are high by historic standards in the UK is that growth has been so low. So again, that comes back to our agenda about growth, about opportunity, about growing the economy and reducing that burden in future.
Okay. So we are here also, and we've got some other England guests here, the English cricket team, yes. And we let them win one test match. But are you following that? And what do you say about it? Because cricket, I mean, there's some areas that are always sensitive, and cricket is one of them.
Well, I grew up watching cricket. I grew up cheering also for the West Indies when they won, but watching great Indian cricket. I think most people thought that we could not win in India this time. So good to see us win one test. But let's see it. Let's follow it and see where we get to in the few weeks that are remaining.
I can't profess much cricket knowledge, but coming from Greater Manchester, people might recognise our dominance on the footballing side. So there's a lot of interest in that wherever you go.
Exactly. And just as we're wrapping up, I mean, as I had made that point earlier about the timing, so the polls at least are showing Labour well ahead at this point, but you've still got some months to go, and we know that a week is a long time in politics. How confident are you? Why do you think that, I mean, given that it's been 14 years out of power, why do you think that Labour is ready now?
Well, look, we're not complacent. It's not just words, we're genuinely not complacent. But I think, first of all, we can say, look at how the Labour Party has changed since 2019. We're a completely different proposition. The credit for that, in a big way, is down to Keir Starmer for having the courage to do that, and I think people recognise that case. Of course, politics always reflects a little bit on the other side, and the fact is that there is a sense that this Conservative government has run out of energy, that there are major problems in public services, and ultimately the economy and the changes that are required to that can't be delivered by the incumbent government. I would say on things like building enough homes in the UK, improving our relationship with the European Union. that is easier for an incoming government to do. And of course, things like our ambition on net zero and getting economic benefits to the UK for that chime very well with the public. But what we will do is not be complacent, but we'll take our role seriously. We'll take that responsibility seriously. Being here in India is part of that.
And of course, a final question. We've got elections coming up soon. The Prime Minister just said that the BJP will cross a record 370, NDA 400 plus. So you're engaging with this government as the potential new government. How are you seeing it?
I've been around in politics long enough to know that in a great democracy like this, it is for the Indian people to decide who they want to form the government. It's a huge exercise to see millions of people going to the polls here in India. It's a huge message to the international community at this time. It's something that both our countries share. We treasure that democratic tradition. I want to see change in the UK. I wait to see what the Indian people decide in the weeks ahead.
Thank you both so very much. It was absolutely fantastic to meet two men who are amongst the major thought leaders now of the new Labour Party. Thank you very much, David Lammy, Jonathan Reynolds, for being on the Dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you.